Girl sells artwork to fund her chemo. Then John Kennedy walks by and shocks everyone. The hospital room was a cold, sterile box, its fluorescent lights humming faintly overhead, casting a pale, unforgiving glow across the white walls. The air clung to the sharp scent of antiseptic, mingling with the distant, rhythmic beeping of monitors from the next room. Sophie Carter sat on the edge of the crinkled hospital bed, her hands curled into tight fists in her lap, her knuckles pale from the pressure. She was 17, but the weight of the past year had carved lines into her young face, making her look older, wearier. Her short-cropped hair, once long and wavy, was a stark reminder of the chemotherapy that had become her routine. Across from her, Dr. Patel adjusted his glasses, his face carefully composed, but Sophie knew that look. It was the same one he wore every time he delivered news she didn't want to hear. His voice was gentle, practiced the kind doctors used when they were trying to soften a blow. "Sophie, the treatment is showing progress," he said, a small spark of optimism in his tone. "The scans look better than last time, but to keep moving forward, you'll need at least 2 more rounds of chemo." Sophie didn't flinch. She had heard this before, the cautious hope, the promise of progress, always followed by a but. She nodded, her eyes fixed on the tiled floor, waiting for the rest. Dr. Patel hesitated, his fingers tapping lightly on the chart in his hands. "I understand your family has been struggling with the costs," he continued, his voice softer now. "Without insurance coverage for the next round, the out-of-pocket expenses will be substantial." The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Sophie's mother, sitting beside her, let out a shaky breath, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. Sophie didn't need to look at her to know she was fighting tears. The medical bills had already bled them dry. Their savings were gone, their emergency fund a distant memory. The last round of treatment had pushed them to the brink, forcing her parents to take out a second mortgage on their small house. And now, this, for the first time in months, Sophie felt a cold thread of fear snake through her chest, not of the cancer, not of the pain or the sickness, but of watching her parents lose everything to keep her alive. The drive home was silent, the kind of silence that pressed against your skin. Sophie stared out the window, watching the city blur past tall buildings, flashing signs, people moving through their lives without a second thought. Her mother gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white, her jaw set in a way that said she was holding back a storm. Her father in the passenger seat turned to Sophie in the back, his voice hoarse. "We'll figure it out, Soph. Everything's gonna be okay." But Sophie heard the lie in it, the crack in his words. He didn't believe it any more than she did. That night she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through her ribs. The darkness was heavy, the kind that made every fear feel bigger, every doubt sharper. She thought of her parents downstairs, probably hunched over the kitchen table, whispering about bills and loans and options they didn't have. She thought of the hospital, the endless cycles of chemo, the way it left her body hollowed out, her bones aching, her stomach churning. She thought of the word Dr. Patel had used, substantial, and how it felt like a wall she couldn't climb. Sophie refused to be the reason her family fell apart. She refused to let them drown in debt because of her. And then, like a spark in the dark, it hit her. Art. It had always been her escape, her way of making sense of the world. When the diagnosis came, when the hospital became her second home, painting was the one thing that kept her grounded. Her canvases were filled with bold colors, sweeping landscapes, and quiet moments of beauty. A desert sky at dusk, a city skyline under stars, a single tree standing against a storm. If she could create something people wanted, something they'd pay for, maybe she could fight back in her own way. By morning, Sophie had made up her mind. She wasn't going to wait for a miracle. She was going to make one. The first stroke of paint always felt like magic. Sophie sat in her cramped bedroom, a canvas propped on a rickety easel, her brush gliding across the surface. Soft blues bled into fiery oranges, colors weaving together to form a sunset over a vast open plain. Her hands moved